Good. This tape is said from the Shabbos of Parshas Vayeshev. Chof Aleph Kislev, Tavshim Mem Hey, December 15th, 1984. The tape is said from memory by Rabbi Zev Katz and produced by Chazarah Tapes in English.
A gute Woche. Gute Woche, everyone. The Rebbe soll gesund sein began the Farbrengen this afternoon that this Farbrengen is coming as a continuation to the Farbrengen of Yutes Kislev. And especially in light of the fact that we are only within 3 days to Yutes Kislev. Yutes Kislev was this Thursday. And today is 21 days in Kislev, which means we're only 3 days from Yutes Kislev. And we know that in Halacha, 3 days are considered one continuation of Zman. So therefore, we are actually still in the spirit of Yutes Kislev. And particularly, in view of the fact that the pasuk of Poda b'sholem nafshi mikrovli, ki berabim hoyu imodi, has a shaykhis to Yutes Kislev. So we all know. So ki berabim hoyu imodi. So Rebbe is teaching, it means, simple pshat in the pasuk means, Poda b'sholem nafshi, my soul was redeemed in peace, which is the pasuk in Tehillim, which the Alter Rebbe was up to when he was notified that he's being released from prison. The continuation of the pasuk is, Ki berabim hoyu imodi. He was with me, he, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was with me, berabim, in public. So the Rebbe is interpreting that the celebration of the Poda b'sholem nafshi is not just one singular celebration. We have to celebrate in a way of rabim, in a plural way. And therefore we Farbrengen Yutes Kislev. And today the Farbrengen as well is coming as a continuation to the Farbrengen of Yutes Kislev, which this is the idea of berabim hoyu imodi, a Farbrengen in a way of rabim. Furthermore, it is rabim also in the sense that it is with many, many participants, which this is also an inyan, because we know, the Gemara tells us, beroiv am hadras melech, when there's an inyan of beroiv am, a large attendance, this adds glory to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When there's a ruchnistic celebration taking place, this adds more glory, the fact that there are more people present. Also the fact that this Farbrengen is taking place in a place which is a shul, a place of learning and davening, this also adds to the chshivas of the thing. And we find, even in Gemara, that the Gemara discusses the concept of moisifin al ha'azorah and moisifin al Yerushalayim. That means that when the Chachamim realized that the Azorah in the Beis HaMikdash was not large enough, there existed a concept that they would enlarge the Azorah so that the Azorah should be able to accommodate all the people needed. The same thing, the Yerushalayim, the city, was able to be extended. In other words, the borders of Yerushalayim were extended to the outskirts of Yerushalayim, and this became considered part of Yerushalayim, all because of the fact when it was needed for more people. So we see that the inyan of Zman and Mokim, time and space, which all of these come together in Kedusha. Zman and Mokim are both created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they usually come together. So here, again, we are having a Farbrengen of Yutes Kislev in a format of rabim. In other words, it's not just the first Farbrengen, it's a Farbrengen in a plural. We Farbrengen more than once. And it's with the participation of rabim. And it is in a place where rabbim are participating in a place which, in fact, this place also at a certain time, the Rebbe added, had to be enlarged in order to be able to accommodate all the participants in the Farbrengen. So this is the inyan of today, when we are still within the 3 days of Yutes Kislev. And particularly, we will take in consideration something else, that the 3rd day to Yutes Kislev, which is today, is on a Shabbos. And Shabbos, we know, elevates all the days of the week. Vayechulu hashamayim va'aretz, see this teaches? It brings an uplifting in the entire week. So Yutes Kislev, which we just had 2 days ago, is also being uplifted spiritually today. And based on what Chazal tell us, that kol ha'omer vayechulu, anyone that recites Vayechulu on Shabbos, Nase Shutif LaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Maaseh Bereishis. Chazal tell us that if one recites Vayechulu on Shabbos, he becomes a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in creation of the world. So this is the greatness of Shabbos. And when we say becoming a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the creation of the world, means way back to step one of creation. In other words, not when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and the world was about to be finished, right before Shabbos. He's becoming a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the very inception of him creating the world. And the concept of partner, the Rebbe went on, when two people are partners, it doesn't mean that half belongs to one and the other half belongs to another. It is not so, the Rebbe says. Partnership means the whole thing belongs to both of them. Each one is a balabas over the whole thing. So in this particular case, a Yid is becoming a partner with the Rebbe. On this great day of Shabbos, brings out such a tremendous thing that a Yid is bekoyach to become a partner with the Rebbe in Maaseh Bereishis, in creation of the world. So this is how outstanding this day is. And this day, this is also one of the 3 days, in other words, today is the third day, which has a shaykhah still to Yitas Kislev. And if we're talking about the Rebbe creating the world, he created the world Olam al Miluyah Nivra. In other words, the world is created that it has everything what it needs. The only thing is, a Yid has his avodah. Every Yid was given his task, what he should do in this world. And here the Rebbe said, at times we may think that we come into certain situations where we have our task which is given to us, and at times we have to, in order for us to go on with our daily activities, Yidden have to come into contact with Goyim and have shaykhs with Goyim in business. So the Yid thinks, what is the reason of him having a shaykhs with the Goyim business? Because his parnaseh is channeled to him through the Goy. But the Rebbe says this is wrong. Not only is it wrong, but it is a tipshus, it is a foolishness to come up with such a thought. If the Rebbe is the one who is feeding billions of people, the Rebbe sees to it that and sees that everyone should have his needs, so we will say that the Rebbe could provide the entire world. How is he going to provide the needs of this individual Yid? This is going to be channeled through the Goy. It can definitely not be so. But for what reason does the Rebbe make that a Yid should, because of business, have to have a shaykhs to Goyim? It is for one reason. The reason is that the Yid should utilize his influence on the Goy and see to it that the Goy should act properly as a Goy is supposed to act. As the Rebbe stressed, we know that Goyim are also commanded on 7 mitzvahs. They are the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noyach. And this is what a Goy is obligated to fulfill. So the reason why a Yid is coming into contact with the Goy is so that the Goyim should be introduced to know to fulfill these mitzvahs. Let me read it on further. We know that discussed last week as well, that the entire system, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, is in the format of mashpia mekabel. In other words, give and take. So the same thing here. When a Yid is coming to have a shaykhs with a Goy, so the Rebbe put it up in such a way that really the Yid should be mashpia to the Goy and see to it that the Goy should act accordingly as he's supposed to and fulfill all the 7 mitzvahs. But in order, it shouldn't be just in a way of the Yid being mashpia to the Goy. The Rebbe also made it in a complete scene that it should look like that the Goy is the one who is, that the Yid is also a mekabel, he's receiving from the Goy. In other words, he's having his income and business, which he's earning money, and having his earnings which are channeled through the Goy. But the truth is, why is all this? Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu leading to all these circumstances? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is leading to all this so that the Yid should be able to share his influence with the Goy and see to it that the Goyim that he's coming into contact with should fulfill the Zayim mitzvahs b'nei Noach, which each and every Goy is obligated to fulfill. It is also the Sedre of Vayeshev today. And Vayeshev Yaakov, and as we know, Yaakov already, when we're reading in this Sedre, Yaakov was in a position that he was ready for the coming of Mashiach at this time. And as Rashi comments, Bikesh Yaakov Leishev Bishalva. Yaakov wanted to sit in peace. Kafatz olav rugza shal Yosef. So here the problem with Yosef came. So the Rebbe pointed out that really Yaakov was concerned to have peaceful years, and Yaakov really deserved them. Yaakov was a tzaddik. Yaakov was at a level that he was already ready for the coming of Mashiach. So the Rebbe says if we make a proper calculation, Yosef was 17 years old when this incident happened. When Yaakov left Lavan, how old was Yosef? Yosef was 6 years old. It was approximately 2 years that Yaakov was traveling. So Yosef was 8 years old. So actually, from the time Yosef was 8 till the age when Yosef reached 17, Yaakov did have peaceful years. In other words, when did the problems begin? When Yosef was at the age of 17. So this was almost 10 years later. So it was almost for a period of 10 years. As the Rebbe pointed out, 10 years is like a complete cycle. So almost for close to 10 years, Yaakov did have the type of life, the type of peaceful life, which he was very anxious to have, and be able to dedicate himself to serve the Rebbe. The Rebbe concluded the Sikha that now we are waiting for the... Yaakov was already ready for Geula in his generation. But after what we have gone through throughout all these generations, now we are definitely ready for Geula. I don't know if it was here or later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe referred to the writings of the Mittel Rebbe, that the Mittel Rebbe writes that the tzaras which Yidden had in Galus should never repeat again. In other words, we had already enough tzaras that we are already ready for the coming of Mashiach. Now that we are ready for the coming of Mashiach, we're going to be zeicha to get the third Beis HaMikdash revealed. So by the first and second Beis HaMikdash, there were many limitations. The Beis HaMikdash was not allowed to be constructed in the evening, at night, and there were other halachic limitations when you are allowed to build it, when you're not allowed to build it. Now that we are waiting for the third Beis HaMikdash, the third Beis HaMikdash could come down at any time, let it be at night, let it be Shabbos, let it be any time. As long as it should already come, it is already the high time for the Beis HaMikdash to come and for Mashiach to come and take us all out of Golus. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe went on explaining how Kol Yoima V'Yoima Ovid Avidata. Every day has its inyan. To such an extent that we find every single day had a korban which was brought on that day. So this indicates that every day has its inyan. Today, it is the date of Chaf Aleph Kislev, 21 days in the month of Kislev, and it is also on Shabbos. The days of the month, this has a shaykhs to the count according to the Levana. The days of the week, this comes from the sunrise. However, in other words, we can have Chaf Aleph Kislev, mustn't necessarily be on a Shabbos. We can have Parshas Vayeshev, and it doesn't have to be Chaf Aleph Kislev. Chaf Aleph Kislev on a Shabbos mustn't be Parshas Vayeshev. That could also happen. In other words, these two inyanim are not bound that they always come together. It happens to be this year that these inyanim are together. If we want to look back and search and find what is the specialty of the day of Chaf Aleph Kislev, so we know we have Sfarim which discuss every single date in Jewish history, going back to Megillas Tainus. And there's a Megillas Tainus which tells us exactly what has happened on Chaf Aleph Kislev. The same episode which Megillas Tainus tells us what happened on Chaf Aleph Kislev is related in Gemara as well. It's a Gemara in Yuma. The Rebbe says, in generations ago, if they wanted to check a Sefer Torah, if there was especially in time when there was nothing printed and everything was written, and they wanted to check if something is correct, they would usually check it against two Svarim. And if two Svarim would both write, it would be written in two Svarim, the identical way, this would be an indication that this is the correct way, and this is how it should be written, the third Sefer as well. Megillas Tainus is set up in a sequence of dates. In other words, Aleph of the month, Beis of the month, whenever there's something special on that given date, that's in this sequence it's discussed in Megillas Tainus. After this month is finished, it's discussed, the next month is discussed. If Here we have an inyan, which in Megillus Tainus a date is given for Chaf Aleph Kislev. The Gemara tells us the same story. The Gemara gives us the same story with a different date, but not only a different date, but a different month. So it could be, the Rebbe says, the date there may be an error in Megillus Tainus. But we can't say that Megillus Tainus has two errors, side a date and side a month, because if Megillus Tainus, if I recall correctly, the Rebbe mentioned, in Gemara it's mentioned that this episode took place on Chof Ches Tevis. Now there is a difference between Chof Ches and Chof Aleph, and there's also the difference between Kislev and Tevis. Now, could be there's an error in the date of the Chof Aleph, but if Megillus Tainus would hold that it didn't happen on Kislev, but it happened on Tevis, then he would have put it where it discusses everything which transpired in Tevis. So being that Megillus Tainus has this mentioned in Kislev, so we must say he definitely holds it in Kislev. The Rebbe says, so therefore it means more to be acceptable that this Inyan Taka happened at the correct date is as it is mentioned in Megillus Tainus. Megillus Tainus tells us what happened on Chaf Aleph Tevis, Chaf Aleph Kislev, I'm sorry. On Chaf Aleph Kislev, there were a group of Jews who were unhappy with the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore they decided that they would go to Alexander Moikton, who was the ruler at that time, and tell him that in Yerushalayim there are Jews that are rebelling against him. And therefore what he should do is he should go to Yerushalayim and take the Beis HaMikdash away from them. When Shimon HaTzadik, who was a Kohen, heard what happened, he immediately dressed himself in the clothes of a Kohen, took a group of people with him, and traveled for an entire night in the direction to go and meet Alexander Moikton. And Megillus Tainus tells us that when the first delegation had already came to Alexander Moikton, he left his palace and he began traveling towards the direction of Yerushalayim. So in the middle of the way, after Shimon HaTzadik traveled for an entire night and Alexander was traveling for an entire night, that is when they met. Upon Alexander seeing Shimon HaTzadik being dressed in Bigdei Kehuna, he immediately went off his horse and bowed down to Shimon HaTzadik. When the people who were with him asked him, what is this? Why are you bowing down to this Jew? So he responded that it is in every milchama, in every battle which he has, and he succeeds in his battle, he sees before him the picture of this Jew. In other words, this is the face which comes before him whenever he succeeds in a battle, whenever he succeeds in a milchama. After a moment passed, he asked Shimon HaTzadik, what is the reason for your traveling here? So Shimon HaTzadik immediately told him the entire problem. And naturally, he gave in to the request of Shimon HaTzadik that nobody should touch the Beis HaMikdash. The Yidden should be able to go on with their avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. On the contrary, those that was the first delegation who was interested in convincing him to take away the Beis HaMikdash, their interest was in avodah zarah, which was on Har Grizim. So what he did was he disallowed them to be able to build whatever they wanted on Har Grizim. This is the story what is related to us and what has transpired on Chaf Aleph Kislev. Rebbe says, what we can take from this story is a tremendous lesson, a remarkable lesson. What do we see from here? Shimon HaTzadik went to Bizach Mishtadl to intervene by a Goyish king. So actually he could have had a different approach to it. He could have dressed himself up like a Goy and go out and look like one of them and act like one of them, and by doing such attitude he would have been able to convince Alexander to give him what he needed. From here we see this is tremendous moral which we can take from here. When is a Yid Matzliach? When a Yid needs something from a Goy. Times we have to come on and intervene by Goyim from something. When do we succeed in this? It is only when a Yid goes out dressed as a Kohen, dressed in the big kahuna. The Yid goes out dressed like a Yid and acting like a Yid and not hiding his Yiddishkeit in any way whatsoever. Furthermore, Al Pi Halacha, the question arises if a Kohen is allowed to leave Yerushalayim with the big kahuna. And Al Pi Halacha he's not allowed to. The only reason Shimon HaTzadik left with the big kahuna was for one reason, because this was a question of Pikuach Nefesh. So for Pikuach Nefesh, he permitted himself to wear the big kahuna and go out and meet Alexander Moikton and intervene with him to see to it that they do not touch the Beis HaMikdash. And this is the tremendous moral which we can take from this, that we do not have to follow the Goyim, dance like the Goyim, get dressed like the Goyim. When does the Yid succeed? And Goyim admitted. Here we see Alexander Moikton admitted that what leads to all of his success and the Milchames and all of his battles, that he sees before him this face. And that is why he's successful. In other words, Goyim themselves admit that they are not even looking for this. They're not looking for Yidden to go ahead and act like them. A Yid is supposed to act like a Yid, dress like a Yid, act like a Yid, and all of his inyanim. And in no way whatsoever have any interest to go ahead and copy after the Goy. One other thing. When is one permitted to put on Big Day Kahuna? He has to be toy. He has to be pure. Here the Rebbe referred to what he spoke at length in the Farbrengen of Yutas Kislev. The greatness of purity of Tahara. In the Shia Rambam of the day of Yutas Kislev, the Rambam stresses the greatness of Tahara. That Tahara, pureness, spiritual pureness, leads to the highest things. It brings to Kedusha, it brings one to become closely associated with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It is all through Tahara. So when one has to bring himself up to an union of Tahara, in other words, uplift ourselves to see to it that spiritually we are pure, and then we are worthy of wearing Big Day Kahuna. Which this brings the real Big Day Kahuna, the pasuk tells us, it brings honor, glory, and beauty. Because this is the real beauty of a Yid. The real beauty of a Yid is when he's dressed like a Yid and acts like a Yid, and that is when he's really beautiful. Not when we will think we will act like Goyim, we will dress like them, when we follow in their drachim and their paths. This will bring us beauty, this will bring us success, and by doing so, the Goyim will listen to us, should we have to come on to them. This is beferish not so. And this is what the story of Megillas Tainis of today's day teaches us, how a Yid is supposed to be proud with his Yiddishkeit and never in any way hide it or feel ashamed with it or try to cover it up and so forth. This incident shows us how a Yid is supposed to be constantly proud of his Yiddishkeit and never hide it in any way whatsoever. Later in the Farbrengen, as usual, the Rebbe learned a Rashi in this week's Sedre and also spoke about the greatness of Afotas HaMayonis, of spreading Chasidus and seeing to it that Chasidus reaches to each and every Yid. The fact that we will close ourselves up and sit in our homes, sit in our places, and trying to sit bekovedik, honorable and reputable, and not go out and reach to Yidden who as yet are not close to Chassidus, this the Rebbe says is not what Yutas Kislev is demanding from us. We know there's a famous expression from the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Nishma Seiden, where he expressed himself that the real Afotus HaMayonis, spreading of Chassidus, with real strength, began after Peterburg. In other words, it began after the Alter Rebbe was released from prison. And therefore the Rebbe went on, it is the Frierdiker Rebbe in later generations who introduced the concept of not only spreading Chasidus and spreading Mamorim of Chasidus in its original text, but translating Chasidus into different languages as well, something which until the days of the Frierdiker Rebbe was strange. And then Mamorim began being translated in Yiddish and other languages, to reach to those people who as yet cannot understand Hasidus in its original text. Rabbi says, we know that people usually like, when it comes to food, people like fresh food. This is what we find even in the Beis HaMikdash by the Lechem Aponim. The greatness of it was that it It was like a fresh piece of bread. So if we were to take in Yonim Chasidus, new in Yonim Chasidus, the Rebbe says, and put it into the mail, and by the time it reaches somebody, it's not going to be fresh anymore. It will be stale. So therefore, as the generations go by, as the times go by, there are new eitzes, there are new ways how to be able to reach out to people the fastest way possible with a fresh Inyan Chassidus. There's a way of telegram, but a telegram still, while the telegram is being sent here, it is taking time till the telegram reaches the person who it's addressed to. However, when we're talking about spreading Chassidus through radio, it is something which is simultaneous. Simultaneously, while the Chassidus is being learned from the person who's learning Chassidus on the radio, it can be heard all over and can be heard at far distances, and especially when the Inyanim Chassidus are learned with a Geschmack, with a Chayes, with a Lebedigkeit, and especially, as Chazal tell us, Dvarim hayotzim min halev, words that come out of one's heart, anichnasim al halev, then they are guaranteed to enter to one's heart. And here the Rebbe is referring to the Hasidus and the Tanya, which is being learned by Rabbi Weinberg over the radio. And the Rebbe says this is a tremendous thing, especially the time when it is being learned, which is Motzei Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos is a specific time when it has a shayches to the Suda of David Malka Mashiach. And here we are spreading the Mayonis Hasidus, which this will lead to the coming of Mashiach. So it's extremely appropriate on such a time of Motzei Shabbos to learn to bring the words of Hasidus, which simultaneously, while they are being learned here, it can be heard by many, many people who are distances away. He says he's talking about this today because this week a new sefer was printed. The Shiurim, as the Rabbi Weinberg learns the Shiurim on the radio, the third volume of the Shiurim on the Shara Yichud V'Emunah came out in print. So this came out in print this week, the Rebbe says, and some other Hasidic Svarim, which were also printed recently. And all of this is additional stages in the Inyan of Afatas HaMayones. The Rebbe says the Torah Oyer was reprinted, Mamorim from the Mittel Rebbe, and a new volume of the Oyer Torah of the Tzemach Tzedek just came off the press. So we have many new Inyanim Chassidus, so all of this is additions in the Inyan of Afatas HaMayones. Interestingly, after this Sikha, the Rebbe gave a bottle of mashke to Rabbi Weinberg. And Rabbi Weinberg told him to announce that this Wednesday night there will be a Farbrengen in 770 in honor of the 24th volume of Lekutei Sichos of the Rebbe Zilgazin, which just came off the press a few days ago. And he also announced that on Thursday night there will be a Farbrengen in honor of the new Sefer of the Shiurim in Tanya, as the Shiurim were learned on the radio. In honor of that, there will also be an additional Farbrengen. So Rebbe tells him he should be Omer Dava B'Shem Oimroi. He should say who edited the Sefer. So Rabbi Weinberg was speaking like in a dilemma. What is he going to announce? He felt strange announcing that he was the one that edited the Sefer. So he says, well, the Shara Yichud V'Emunah and the Shiurim Shara Yichud V'Emunah, which came out through the Vad La'afatas Chasidus. In other words, this is the committee which is learning the Tanya on the radio and published the Sefer. So Rebbe tells him that the Tanya, the Shara Yichud V'Emunah, was edited by the Alter Rebbe. This we all know. This is not what I'm telling you to say. I want you should say who edited this Sefer. So he was again like, and I said, well, he said that there was a committee of Vad La'afatas Chasidus, and he also mentioned himself in the committee who edited this Sefer. But this shows us how the Rebbe appreciates this channel of Afatas HaMayones, of learning Tanya on the radio, how it reaches to many, many people, and at the same time, now that the Shiurim, as they are being learned on the radio, were now published in a format of a Sefer. B'negei the Rashi in this week's Sedre, in Parshas Vayeshev, It is Kapitel Lametes, Pasuk Gimel, right after Hamishi. Pasuk tells us, Vayar Adon of his master saw ki Hashem itoi, v'choil ansher uoisa Hashem atzliach biyodai. And whatever Yosef is doing, he's successful. He's succeeding. Ki Hashem itoi, Rashi quotes these words and comments, Shem Shamayim Shogur Bepiv, that Hashem's name was common in Yosef's mouth. In other words, Yosef would many times refer to HaKadosh Baruch. In other words, Rashi is teaching Hashem itoi. What does it mean Hashem is with him? Yosef had Hashem with him because he was constantly talking about HaKadosh Baruch. Rabbi says it's a Rashi which is really not understood. If we look into Chumash, there's one pasuk before this. Pasuk tells us, Vayehi Hashem es Yosef. Hashem was with Yosef. Vayehi Ish Matzliach, and he was very successful. And Rashi doesn't comment anything on that. Comes here the second time. It is mentioned, Vayar Adonov ki Hashem ito, his master saw that Hashem is with him. So here Rashi is translating, what does it mean Hashem is with him? That he's constantly referring to Hashem. Usually when we learn Hashem ito, it means that Hashem is with him, Hashem is bringing him success. So Rashi here says, no, it does not mean that. What does it mean? It means that he's constantly mentioning Hashem's name. So first of all, why is Rashi forced to take the words out of its usual context, how we would usually teach Hashem ito? Secondly, why doesn't Rashi do the same by Pasuk Beis? Because this is the first time when the idea of Hashem being with Yosef is mentioned. And above that, let us look a little weiter. We'll look weiter after Yosef was put into prison. There's a third time, Pasuk Chaf Aleph. In Pasuk Chaf Aleph, the Pasuk tells us, Vayehi Hashem es Yosef. What does Rashi say there, Vayehi Hashem es Yosef? Nothing. It is only here, the second time that it is mentioned. This is where Rashi teaches it, and teaches it in a different way than we would usually teach it. Furthermore, let us go back a few sedras ago. When Yaakov came to his father Yitzchak to ask for the bracha. And Yitzchak was surprised, how is it that he came back so fast? So he told him, Hikra Hashem, that Rebishter has made it that I can come back fast, and Hashem has sent me whatever I need, and so forth. So Rashi comments over there that Yitzchak was surprised. Why was he surprised? Because Yitzchak thought it was Esav, and here all of a sudden he's talking about Hashem. He knew that Esav was not Shem Shamayim Shogar Bepiv. Esav it wasn't popular for Esav to refer constantly to HaKadosh Baruch. What do we see from this? Let us go a step further. We know that Esav copied his father Yitzchak, right? Esav tried to show Yitzchak that whatever Yitzchak is doing, he's also doing. So if Yitzchak realized that Yaakov is talking constantly about Hashem, he was surprised. He knew this is not Esav's attitude. Obviously, this wasn't Yitzchak's attitude either. Why? Because would this be Yitzchak's attitude, it would have been Esav's also. A siman that Yaakov, referring constantly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this was viewed something strange by Yitzchak. The fact that he saw Shem Shamayim Shogar Bepiv, and he knew that Esav is not Shem Shamayim Shogar Bepiv. Esav was trying to show his father that he's doing everything he's doing. A siman Yitzchak also wasn't Shem Shamayim Shogar Bepiv. So what's going on with this idea of, is it proper to have Shem Shamayim Shogar Bepiv? Then let us go back also on Chumash Bereshis. By Avimelech. When Avimelech with Yitzchak. So Avimelech is telling Yitzchak, Roi roinu, we have seen ki Hashem imcha, that Hashem is with you. So Chazal comment, Roi roinu, what is the double expression? We have seen, why does he say we have seen twice? We have seen by Avram, and now we see by you, that Hashem is with you. There, Rashi also does not comment, what does it mean Hashem is with you, that we have seen that Shem Shamayim is Shogar B'Piyam. So actually, the first time when it's mentioned in the Torah that Hashem is with him, and according to Rashi, that this means Shem Shamayim Shogar B'Piv, So right over there by Avimelech, Rashi should have commented, Roi roinu ki Hashem mimach shishem shamayim shogah b'pih. And Rashi doesn't. So by Avimelech, Rashi doesn't say anything. The first time here in Vayeshev, Rashi doesn't say anything. It comes to the second time, Vayar Adonov ki Hashem itoy, this is when Rashi teaches, what does it mean, Shem shamayim shogah b'pih. The Rebbe is explaining, and the Chav Gimel also not. So the Rebbe is explaining what is really going on here. Here we are dealing, before that, there's a Medrash. Medrash tells us that when Yosef was walking around in Potiphar's home, Rebbe used the expression, he was constantly chepching. Chepching is a Yiddish word. He was constantly saying something. And when he was asked, what is this all about? He's mispal to HaKadosh Baruch. This is a Medrash. So the commentaries on Rashi, there's Rabbi Yoam Mizrahi and the Maral Miprog, they all want to tie this Medrash with the Rashi's comment and tie them together. Being that the Medrash tells us that Yosef was walking around and constantly davening, so that means Shem Shamayim Shogah B'Pih. It's the same idea. Rabbi says it is not so. Why? So when we learn Rashi, our prime concern has to be to understand Rashi in the realm of Pshuta Shel Mikra. Whether Rashi is ausgehalten according to Halacha or according to Drash, and to be worried that Rashi in the Medrash should say the same thing, this is not our concern. At least not our prime concern. Our prime concern is that Rashi has to be understood in Pshuta Shel Mikra for the Benchama Shel Mikra. So the Rebbe is learning as follows. The Rebbe is learning, naturally, we teach Vayhi Hashem es Yosef in Pasuk Beis. We teach that the Rebbe was with Yosef. Here we are dealing with Goyim. Potiphar or Avimelech. They were Goyim. They were Goyim that did not believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Potiphar was part of Paro's staff. Paro did not believe in Hashem. True, the child did not learn yet that Paro expressed himself, Mi Hashem, who is the Rebbe. This we'll first learn in Chumash Ma'is. But we know that it is an accepted fact that Paro believed in Avodah Zarah. And Potiphar, being one of the Sari Paro, naturally also believed in Avodah Zarah. So the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was with Yosef, this is something which only Yosef knew. Potiphar, seeing Yosef successful, would not attribute this to the Rebbe. He would attribute it to Avodah Zarah. To him it had no meaning on the Rebbe. So Memela, now that we're learning Vayhi Hashem es Yosef, this the Torah is telling us that the Rebbe was with Yosef, and therefore, as a result of the Rebbe being with him, Vayhi Ish Matzliach, he was successful. Then we come to Pasuk Gimel. Vayar Adonov, his master saw. That's something new. It's another step. Vayar Adonov, his master saw. Who was his master? Potiphar. What did he see? Ki Hashem mitay. He didn't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That was something which he had no understanding in. He didn't believe it. It was strange to him. So that's what Rashi says. Here we cannot teach that Vayar Adonov ki Hashem itoy means that Potiphar saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with him. He did not believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore Rashi says, here you know what to teach of ki Hashem itoy. Here we must teach ki Hashem itoy. Potiphar saw that Yosef is constantly referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is something which he saw. Because he saw him constantly, whenever he was talking, he said, Baruch Hashem, in any way possible, referring to Hashem, referring to the Rebbe. So that is why when it comes to Vayar Adonov, here Rashi has to teach that Ki Hashem Mitoy here means Shem Shamayim Shogah B'Piv. Back to Avimelech. Roi Roinu, we saw that Hashem is with you. Here also it is referring to HaKadosh Baruch. We don't have to teach the Shem Shamayim Shogah B'Piv. Why? Because what happened over there? Avimelech started up with Rivka. What happened? He was plagued. Not only was he plagued, his entire staff was plagued. All of his avodim, everybody was plagued. If it would be something which would be only to his Avodah Zarah, who he was believing in, perhaps he himself would have been punished. But to get such schmitz, to be punished in such a way that it should affect everybody, this is something which Avimelech realized. Even he believing in Avodah Zarah, realized that it's something unusual to happen. So that's why he comes to Yitzchak and he tells him, Roi, Roinu, we have realized Ki Hashem Imcha, that the Rebbe is with you. It's something outstanding has happened here. Excuse me. Back to Yaakov and Yitzchak, I don't think that the Rebbe fell for that. When Yaakov was told by Yitzchak, when Yitzchak was surprised, how is it that Shem Shamayim Meshoga B'piv? So here we see how everything is extremely accurate. That the Ki Hashem Itoi over here, Take means the Rebishta. In Vahi Hashem Es Yosef, when it comes to Vayar Adonov, Rashi has no alternative, but he's forced to teach that what does it mean? It means that Potifar realized that Shem Shamayim Meshoga B'piv. Weiter, Vahi Hashem Es Yosef, Vayetol of Chesed, Vayiten China in Pasuk Chafalet. Here, so as far as we know, it's Vahi Hashem Es Yosef. The people that were with him in jail, Taka did not know that this is the Rebishter. There was no way for them to see that there's something special here happening to Yosef, where they will realize the Yad Hashem. We know, the Torah tells us that Vahi Hashem Es Yosef, Vayetol of Chesed. That's why Vayiten China Bein Esar Beis Hasoyer. Again, the Rebbe spoke about the Shir and the Rambam. Today's Shir and Rambam, and it is in Hilchas Tumas Oichlin. The Rebbe referred to it briefly. We find in Hilchas Tumas Oichlin, we find the... Okay, and there we find how a Yid can accomplish with his machshava, with his thought, how thought plays a role. In other words, thought of a Yid can play a role, and this can affect the tumah v'tara of certain inyan. To the extent that even a katan, a youngster, there we find it in the other way around. A maisa of a katan, an act of a katan regarding a certain kela, regarding the halachas of tumah, later cannot be spoiled any longer, even by the machshava, by the thought of an adult. So Rebbe says this halacha shows us two things. On one hand, it shows us the great importance of a thought of a yid, how much the machshava of a yid plays a role, and therefore it shows us how careful we are to be, not only with our acts but also with our thoughts. Because if we see that our thought can have an effect in halacha, b'negei halachas of tumah v'tara, this shows us how we are to guide and guard our thoughts. On the other hand, it shows us the ma'isa of a katan, even a youngster, even a small Jewish child, how great his act is in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it cannot be avoided, it cannot be spoiled by the thought of an adult. There we're talking about the details in halachas of tumah, but as far as we are concerned, it shows us the dearness of Yidden, how dear a Yid is. And therefore, in terms of we have to look at it, how dear and precious every Yid is, this shows us, from another aspect, the great importance of Avas Yisrael. How we have to love every Yid. And love to the extent of not only Avas Yisrael, but the Rebbe keeps on stressing Achdus Yisrael, total unity amongst Yidden. Because here we realize the greatness of every Yid. And therefore we have to appreciate every Yid and extend love to each and every Yid until we reach a level of total unity to each and every Yid. Also in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe referred that being that we are talking about inyanim of afatzas hamayonis, of looking for various angles, various ways to spread Chasidus and reach with Chasidus all over, Rebbe says he would come up with another suggestion, that from today, from Yutes Kislev, until, during the days of Chanukah, and extended until Yud Shvat, all the Lubavitcher Svarim, the recent ones which have been printed, those which were printed a while ago, all the Svarim which were printed and published by Lubavitch, should be sold with a 20% deduction. The Rebbe says now that we will be able to purchase these Svarim with a 20% deduction. So first of all, we will have 20% extra to buy more Svarim. And we will be able to enrich our houses with having more Svarim. And Rebbe quoted an Arizal. The Arizal tells us that when we do mitzvahs, a mitzvah does not have to be for free. A mitzvah is appreciated by a Yid when he knows that the mitzvah costs him money. Mitzvah should not be lemagona, uses the He uses the expression. It's a Aramaic expression. And therefore the Rebbe says when a Yid buys a Sefer, and he knows he spent money on the Sefer, and this money is dear to him, and he spent it on the Sefer, and later when he learns in the Sefer, he will appreciate his learning entirely different. The Rebbe urged that we utilize this sale and see to it that we get Svarim and learn in these Svarim, not just get the Svarim and buy them and hold them, but we tackle learn in them. And then we will appreciate the learning also because we are learning in Svarim which we have just spent our monies on. And Memela, this will arouse within us a cheshik, a desire to learn in these Svarim. And we will learn ourselves and we will learn with others. And this is another way for the Inyan of Afatzas HaMayonis, for spreading Chasidus and reaching out to each and every Yid who as yet does not have a Shaykhus to Chasidus, to reach to him and bring him closer to Chasidus. And by doing this, this will lead to the coming of Mashiach. The Rebbe says there are two expressions in Gemara. Gemara discusses rather two psukim. One pasuk tells us that Mashiach will come in time, Be'ita. There's another pasuk which tells us Achishena, that the Rebishter will hasten the coming of Mashiach. So the Gemara tells us that if the Yidden would be Zaycha, then it would be Achishena, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have him come before the time. If Chas v'Shalom not, then Mashiach will come in his time. The Rebbe says it is definitely the Be'ita, it is definitely already the time, even without hastening it, without rushing it is definitely already the time for Mashiach to come. The Mela, by doing this, which is another avenue, another angle in the Inyan of Afatzas HaMayonis, this will lead to the coming of Mashiach, which is already good time for him to come. B'meir v'yameinu. A good tavach.
I have your attention. I published my first Lubavitch book. It's a pamphlet about Rashi, the Rashi discussion according to how the Rebbe Shlita has learned it. Anybody would like to, I don't know, I was going to give it out for free. I think I'm going to charge money for it this time, since the Rebbe mentioned this. So, some kind of donation for it. No, I'm trying to